Hello, welcome to Miniature Realms. My name is Stuart. It's time to get back on the Warlord Games Epic Battles painting train. And first up for the new Revolution release are the US Continentals.
Miniature Realms is proudly sponsored by Counter-Attack Bases. They stock a wide range of counters, gaming aids and movement trays for multiple game systems and offer custom items to suit your club or even your podcast or YouTube channel. Check out the link in the video description. So Revolution was announced, it's gone up for pre-order. I've made a couple of videos already. One was just a little overview and my thoughts on what the release is looking like, and a second one because Warlord very kindly sent me these frames earlier, which I'm using today for this painting tutorials when I looked through all of the frames and gave you my thoughts on those as well. But today I'm going to do the first painting tutorial. There will be more. I'm very busy doing lots of different things at the moment, lots of different things on the channel, so there will be spaced in between other things for different game systems, but I will be doing lots more as we move up to the release of the game. And we're starting with a Continental regular army. You see a picture of Warlord Games' own paint scheme there, and I did look online a little bit at some of the other reference pictures and things I can find. I am not an expert on this period at all. I've read Redcoat by Bernard Cornwell. I've watched Mel Gibson on the TV for movies, but that's about it really. So I may make some mistakes here, so I'm going very heavily on the images that I've already shown you there. So just a couple of reference pictures side by side there. You've got red on the inside of the collar there. It looks like it's turned over those straps, and it's not like that on the Warlord Games paint job. I think it's modelled like that, but also painted like that. You could paint it like that, I'm sure, if you wanted to. It's definitely simpler not to do it. And the other thing I noticed, there looks like there's a belt painted in as well on the Warlord part, and it's not showing up on that reference picture there, and I'm actually leaving that off, and you'll see that when we come to paint it. I'm just leaving it white because I think it looks a little bit better. So we're starting off with a black primed miniature, as usual, all cleaned up. There's very little mould lines on them, so you don't have an awful lot to do. And then I am zenithal priming with my airbrush. I appreciate not everyone has an airbrush, but the way I like to paint my epic armies relatively quickly is to use contrast paints, and that's what this method is going to be about. I'm not saying it's the best method, I'm not saying it's the fastest, it's definitely the easiest for me and getting miniatures on the table quickly. And the way I do this paint job, you'll see an almost a jump off point halfway through where I can say, right, if you don't want to do any highlights, you can just, this is what it looks like with the basic contrast on. And by doing this sort of zenithal, very heavy zenithal highlight with the airbrush, mostly top down, but just leaves some of the shadow in the recesses, it really makes those contrast style paints, don't have to be Citadel contrast, you can use Army Painter if you want, but it really uses those contrast style paints to their best ability really, because you've got shadows in there underneath. You're essentially underpainting and you're leaving some of those shadows showing. And then what I'm doing here is a bit of a dry brush afterwards, very light layers, and sorry it's gone out of focus a little bit here, but you're just picking out all of the detail here. You don't want big streaky marks on, so you want it to be very neat circular dry brushing, very light, but it just picks out that detail again, just really enhances when you add those contrast layers, which I'll be doing all the base coating here. Now the camera bleaches it out a little bit, but it looks semi-grayscale. If you don't have this, you can prime in white or grey and then dry brush afterwards. So then we move on to the first layer. So this is the contrast as Sermon Blue. You don't have to use just this blue. There's probably 2 or 3 in the Citadel contrast range that would work, and there's definitely in some of the alternative ranges as well. So don't worry about changing colours to match what you have in your own collections. Once you've got them all painted on the tabletop, it really doesn't matter all that much. The reason I'm doing it like this, the reason I started with white is there's so much white on the miniature. You've got their trousers, you've got their gaiters, you've got the cross straps on there that are white as well. You've got other areas that want to be white underneath, so your hands and your faces for your flesh. So by spraying this all blue, which is what I could have done, it would take me a lot longer to go and paint all those whites in. So I'm just taking my time here, trying to keep off the white as much as I can, and that might seem like it takes a lot longer now, but it's definitely quicker in my mind than going back and trying to paint in grey and then layer up on white. And we all know white can be tricky to paint at times. So if you start with a really strong white base, then you can save your time at the back end. The trick with contrast paint to get the best out of it is to have just enough that it flows into those recesses really nicely, giving you that sort of accentuated shadow, but not so much that it doesn't show the highlights through at the top, and just take a little bit of time to get that balance right. And different colours and different paints and different brands even will give you different effects. So some you need to thin a little bit, some they're a little bit too thin, maybe you need to do a couple of layers depending on the context in which you're using them. This paint covers really nicely and has quite a pleasing finish as it is. I do highlight it, but it's one of the colours you could probably leave without highlighting. This is Contrast Blood Angels Red, and this is going to be all the trim. So you've got the red trim on the jackets, you've got a little bit showing underneath those cross belts here, and like I said, not as much as the reference picture, but little bits hanging down before it then turns white, so do be mindful of that. And then we've also got the cuffs on all the men as well. They need to be red, and you've got little red bits just tucked in, which you just need the very end of your brush. Again, still trying to be neat and as neat as possible, trying not to get it on that white. Now you will get it on some white, so you can either clean it off straight away, but don't worry too much because you can go back and tidy it up later. But the idea is not to go too much outside the lines and not to get too much red and blue on the white, because then you are doing a lot of work again afterwards. This is Contrast Guilliman Flesh. You want a lighter coloured flesh, and if you apply it right, you won't really need to do too much with it afterwards. I do go back and add a little highlight to the noses and to the bridge of the cheekbones a little bit. I'm just doing a nice even coat, allowing it to flow into all those recesses on the face, really picking up that detail, but not so much that it doesn't run away from those higher areas, that nose, the cheekbones, etc. Just work my way along the line before moving on to the hands afterwards. Contrast Garagax Sewer. This is a mid-brown, a medium brown, and it's perfect for the stocks and all these rifles, and obviously you've got the barrels as well, but I'm going to paint in the whole rifle in this brown colour because it will work as a really nice base for the metallic to go on afterwards. Again, continuing to be as neat as possible, trying to make sure that I don't overspill onto that blue and onto areas of white, not worrying if I do just a touch because you can tidy it up very easily afterwards, but trying to be neat at this point because it will save so much time later on. This is Contrast Black Legion, the darker of the two contrast blacks, and it's perfect for your hats and boots. Now what I'm doing here with these hats is I'm applying it first just to the front to try and keep it nice and neat, and then I'm quickly cleaning my brush off and I'm just running it along the edge of the hat, and it basically works like an edge highlight, but you're taking the paint away instead of adding that highlight on. I know you can see that there, but it saves loads of time, and it's one of the benefits of working with paints like this. It's just a matter now of following that process along, all the way along. You can do the same thing at the back, so clean brush, just wipe away the edge just to get that little highlighted effect. So I've got no intention of going back and doing a standard highlight on these hats. You could use a grey later on. I'm not going to do it. This is army painting. You've got so many of these to do. Got ammunition pouches, which I believe that is what they will be on this side. So they're going to have all their ammunition in there, all of their cartridges, and again they are black. Looking at the reference pictures that I found, and I'm using the same black on all of these. And then to finish off with the black, we're doing all of the boots, well, they're shoes really in this case, because they're covered by gaiters, so there's only a little bit showing at the bottom. And I also go along and cover the rest of the base in black. I like to cover it in a dark colour, and that means that when you stick them to the base later on, you're putting basing material on, there won't be any white showing through, so a nice dark colour to work from really helps. This is Contrast Skeleton Horde. I'm using it for the haversacks, the bread bag. I'm not sure what the term would be in this period, but I'm using it on the bag on the other side, and also for their water canteens as well. Again, in the reference pic I found that was a sort of brownish colour as well, so they're hardly visible because they're tucked under the arm, so I'm just using the same paint for all of those. And this is quite a thin paint, so it runs into the recesses but shows the white through, so it looks quite highlighted already. And something else you can do with the same paint is just paint a couple of pairs of trousers in a different colour. Just gives you a little bit of variation, shows where one trooper may have had to use their own trousers, or they're made from a different place, or they're stained or older or something like that, but it just breaks it up, adds some variation. You'll see it on all the studio paint jobs as well, but I think it's a really nice effect. And in a similar vein, this is Contrast Apothecary White, which is essentially a grey glaze. Again, I'm just adding this just to a couple of the pairs of trousers, just to give a slightly different tone of white to some, again, to give it that bit more variation, a little bit of personality to the unit. Here we have black, Tempar, Cygor brown and Nazdrag yellow, and those are the colours for my hair. So I just have all three pots open and I turn the strip around and work my way around, so you've got a kind of nice even spread of colours and spacing as well, so you don't end up with 3 black in a row, then 3 yellow and then 3 brown. You could have lots more hair colours obviously, but again at this scale you just want to have the appearance of different hair colours. Yes, there would be some red heads, yes there would be other different shades of brown as well, and grey and all different colours, but you don't really need to go into that much detail at this scale. This is tooth and coach dwarven iron, but you can use any dark metallic paint here. You're looking for that gunmetal style metallic paint, something nice and dark. And I'm starting with all of the bayonets at the end. I know there's been lots of comments on these being the wrong way round, which is quite interesting. I don't know whether that argument has landed fully in the end. They are a different way around to the things I've seen before, so that's interesting. Probably doesn't really matter too much in the grand scale of things, but in terms of accuracy, interesting. I'm sure a few of you will comment on that. But just following that colour down, just the front here of the barrel down to where the lock is. There, at a minimum, you could leave them like this. They are more than tabletop ready there and look very good, and that's the beauty of contrast style paints. You could leave it at that stage. But I'm going to carry on and highlight and make them pop a little bit more. This is Leviathan Blue from the Two Thin Coats range. It's much lighter, as you'll see, than the finished colour. So you need to be careful here you don't over highlight or it'll just look far too light. So I'm just doing a few faint lines, almost following in where that contrast paint looks at its lightest. So we darken all those recesses, just the nature of the way it works, it looks a little bit lighter. So I'm just sort of enhancing those areas just a little bit. And where it's a little bit lighter, it looks a little bit worn and sun bleached, which is quite a cool effect anyway. I think I've got the balance just about right. Some people say it should be darker, and I'm sure it should be in terms of pure colour, but I think it looks right as a unit. So if you don't like them looking this light, you could just leave it. And if you're going to leave any colour without highlighting it here, the blue would be fine too. The way you really want to focus is probably on the white and on the red. You don't need to do anything else. So if you were looking for a quicker way of finishing this miniature off now, the very final stage I do, which is highlighting the white, and I've left that to the end because I want it to be clean, you could skip straight to that, and I think these miniatures would still look really, really, really crisp and really, really nice. But saying that, we're back onto the highlights. This is Tooth & Co's Demon Red. Again, just pick your favourite bright red that goes with the contrast paint. We're just putting little dots here on the tops of those cuffs. You still want to leave that darker shade of red shaded in underneath as well. You don't want to completely cover what you've already done. What we're doing is highlighting to make it pop and stand out. And when we move on to the other areas of red, sort of the edges of that jacket, we just want the faintest of lines really. We're not doing too much. Again, leaving lots of that dark red still showing as well. And it just starts to add layers and make it pop and stand out. This is Ambush Yellow, again from the Two Thin Coats range. You could use multiple different colours there. You could probably pick up some Iraqi sand or something from Model Colour, anything in that kind of range. And it's just a really nice way of highlighting over those skeleton horde shaded haversacks or red bags or whatever the official name is for this period. Someone's going to pop that in the comments. Also works on the trousers that we have coloured in that colour as well. And then I like to add just a touch of highlight to the skin. This is pale skin from Two Thin Coats, but any bright flesh colour just to go along and accentuate the cheekbones and the noses, I find is enough. It's still pretty dark anyway. It's not a very pinkish, reddish toned skin. Some people like to do their skin differently, but for my epic strips, I quite like doing it like this, and that looks more than enough on the battlefield. And now, to highlight the metallics we did earlier, we have plate armour, which is slightly brighter, not the brightest in the spectrum there, but I'm just adding it to the tops of the bayonets, just where that light would catch a little bit. You probably wouldn't want the light catching, often giving your position away. And then after I've done those, I just add a little touch more just to the bottom end of the barrel where it meets the lock, just where the angle is most there. Again, it just makes it pop and stand out a little bit more, and maybe the light would catch a little bit there. And you can add a little bit further down the barrel as well. And maybe these would all be blued and it wouldn't be shiny, but on miniatures of this scale, it just looks nicer when they kind of pop and stand out. And then we're just finishing off those rifles with a little bit of gizmo fur and just the tiniest of highlights towards the bottom of that stock where it's sticking out. I'm not doing it anywhere else, not doing it on the reverse of the rifles at all, or the muskets. It just, again, just adds a little extra to it. You don't have to do any of this. Like I said, just adding the white at the end will be enough for most people. And that brings us on to that white. This is white style, but use your favourite white in your collection. And it's going back now and reinforcing the white that's already there on the miniature. And there's not many mistakes. I've not gone over the lines too much. So the less mistakes you've made, the quicker this part is. And you're just making it pop here. I'm not covering the whole miniature in white. I'm actually deliberately leaving quite a lot of the grayer white showing underneath, because that's where you get your layers build up from. And when you do the cross belts, the one that's underneath, you want to leave a little bit where it tucks underneath with the original colour again, so it just helps it pop and stand out. It just seems to tidy it all up, freshen it all up, and really finish these miniatures off. It was exactly the same with the Napoleonic miniatures and all the white on the British troops. By adding the final layer of white and really tidying up those cross belts and making it pop on the front of those trousers, just really seems to bring the strip, bring the unit to life, in my opinion anyway. And there we are, all finished, very much tabletop, a little bit scruffy around the edges, but let's have a look at some proper pictures. And there we are, and I think these look pretty good for a sort of tabletop level, or a decent tabletop level finish for miniatures that are this small. You can definitely paint them better, and if you paint them in a more traditional way, you could probably have them looking a little bit neater as well, and a little bit more vibrant. So it's definitely very valid. But this is the way I like to paint them when I've got lots of them to do. And there's always the kind of the draw to go with the colour of the coat, so in blue in this instance, or red if it's British, and starting from that colour point and spraying on those. But I honestly think that the blue probably only makes up about 30%, 35, 40 maybe max of the total colour of the miniature there. There's easily 50% white, and then you've got the red and you've got the black and there's skin and things as well. So, and the white's so often the hardest to paint and to get looking nice. So, and that's why I started with that grayscale from the Zenithal and the Tri-Brush. I think having that strong white to start with, which is the hardest part, is actually the easiest way for me anyway to do it. If I was to spray the whole miniature blue, it would take me a while to then start painting in greys to layer up the whites. But you do what is easiest for you. We all have things that we like painting, colours that we are comfortable painting versus the other. But let me know in the comments what you think. I'm sure there'll be things I've done wrong or missed. I'm sure people will let me know that in the comments as well. And let me know what you'd like to see painted next. I've got all of the sprues, so I can go ahead and paint anything else. I think someone else has already done the British, painting panzers, and they are stunningly beautiful, and I've painted lots and lots of British when it comes to Napoleonics and things like that, so I'm tempted to avoid just painting more red coats, but if enough people prefer the British, I'll go for them next. But let me know in the comments what you think I should paint next.
Thank you very much for watching. It's always fun to get back to painting some black powder epic battles miniatures, which is where it all began really on this channel many years ago, and you can see the techniques that I'm using there haven't really changed an awful lot. Hopefully you can take something from those if you paint that way. If not, you paint your own way, and hopefully you've enjoyed listening to me rabbit on as I painted. Any questions, please just pop them in the comments below. If you have enjoyed the video, please do give it a like, subscribe to the channel, do comment below, because it really helps out. And if you'd like to support the channel even further, there's loads of ways you can do that. I'm actually selling dice at the moment, and the proceeds go towards supporting me. You'll see a little picture of those pop up on the screen now. You need to email me, the email address that's on the screen, but it's also in the video description, and I'll send you an order form. That's the only way of doing that, because I have a limited amount. I'm not setting up a web store just to sell dice like that. But other than that, there are lots of other things in the video description that you can do to support me. My Patreon is the biggest way you can support the channel. If you're a long-term viewer and you like to see me continue to make videos like this and all the other videos I make, be that chatting about Warhammer the Old World, or painting Warhammer miniatures, or historical stuff like this, supporting me on Patreon really is the best way to help me do that. I've got affiliate links to Warlord Games and Knott's Hobbies and a few other things in there as well. So all great ways, but most of all, just like the video. That's one of the best ways you can support me. So thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you soon.